Dystopia warnings always strongly implied. Yeah, because I'm just sitting here looking through notes of the news stories over the last week or so, and wow, yeah. It's like being back in the days of that sack of blancmange squeezed into a glove, aka Boris Johnson, the man that I unaffectionately referred to as Fred Westminster, but stopped calling him that because it was insulting to Fred West. And just like the bodies that Boris Johnson let pile high, there's a veritable scroll, a litany of failings, of negligence, and loads of people dying as a consequence of what this government's been up to. And not just that, there's the threat to our national security, the threat to our general well-being. But then that's what happens when you let a bunch of public schoolboys make decisions for the rest of the country, when they have no real experience of what it's like to live like a regular person, because they've made their way through the psychopath factory, haven't they? They treat the House of Commons like a Etonian debating society. That and a get-rich-quick scheme, you know, by lobbying on behalf of dodgy donors anyway. Been an interesting couple of days, because under Sunak, things are not really much better than they were under Johnson, because just like Johnson, Sunak is a narcissist, except unlike Johnson, he does not have the superficial charm to pull it off, just this thin-skinned, smug defensiveness, which is broadly seen as repugnant, because I don't think that they've put the correct AI chip into him to make him likeable. No one likes a posh robot. Whereas that affable, eccentric act was how Johnson managed to con all of us and shag all of our mums. Yeah, Johnson's actually shagged all of our mums. When he went abroad as Foreign Secretary, he created entire villages in his own image. Yeah, there's villages in other countries that resemble the village of the damned. So what's happened over the last couple of days, just before the Easter holidays? 2 ministers resigned. And Sunak made the actually insane decision to appoint Jonathan Gullis as Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party. Jonathan Gullis. Yeah, because the last time that you appointed one of the 2019 intake knuckle draggers, Sunak, it went so well, didn't it? Remind me, what happened to 30p Lee Anderson? Oh yeah, he defected to Reform, didn't he? Still a lot of questions to be asked about that as far as I'm concerned, because in a recording that he didn't know was being recorded, back in October, Lee Anderson said that Reform had offered him a substantial amount of money to defect. He said they were mad, obsessed with PR, that they couldn't win. He referred to Tice as a pound shop Farage. And then, hello, a couple of months later, he's got himself embroiled in an Islamophobia scandal, hasn't he? The Tories had to suspend him. And then he goes running over to the Reform Party, who are, as they say themselves, definitely not far right. Which is obviously why they proudly accepted a man that had made Islamophobic comments about Sadiq Khan. 30p Lee Anderson's just a parody of himself, isn't he? A man that resembles a bulldog pretending to be a man. He markets himself as this salt of the earth type, down to pit, you know, working class, man of the people. When in fact, he's just a fucking turncoat. A thick, talentless opportunist who managed to enter Parliament just as the barrel was being scraped. What is actually happening with Lee Anderson is that he's being passed from posh boy to posh boy, like a bit of skirt for all the privately educated lads. They're useful idiot for a little bit, you know. And he'll probably get a fair amount of money for it, but not as much as those men want to make from attaining positions of power in Parliament, because they've seen what the Tories have done. Well, Farage and Tice et al. And all the Vote Leave lot have been influencing Tory policy for some time, which is why we've ended up with Blue Kip, a Conservative party that's proud to encourage the National Front in as voters, because the National Front felt that the Conservatives really represented them. Over 60 Tory MPs aren't standing at the next election. Twats fleeing a sinking ship. And Rishi Sunak is apparently around 2 votes away from a vote of no confidence. So well done, Jonathan Gullis. You've managed to basically attain a job on the Titanic post-sinking. Yeah. It is quite amusing that people call him Jonathan C. Gullis, because he does look to me like the kind of guy that would be happiest flapping around the seaside, shitting on people's heads and stealing their chips. There's some very funny reviews from people that used to be taught by him. Yeah, he was a teacher. Fuck me. Now, the lead election analyst for the BBC, Professor Curtis, has said that the Labour Party have a 99% chance of winning the next general election. He said this in conversation to Sam Blewett at Politico. What an ironic name that is, considering that it's the Tories that blew it. One of the funniest things about this article for me was he was saying that even if there was a hung parliament, Keir Starmer would have a better chance of forming a government because, and I quote, the Conservatives have no friends in the House of Commons. Quite fitting because the rest of the country fucking hates them as well. In other news, public satisfaction with the NHS is at an all-time low. After 14 years of the Tories, satisfaction's at 24%, and those 24% of people are the people, presumably, that the Tories have managed to successfully lobotomise. Actually, that makes sense because that's not far off the percentage of people that would vote for them in an election. The NHS is, and I quote, in a continual state of crisis. And when was satisfaction with the NHS at its peak? In 2010, when it was at 70%, just before Labour left office. So after 13 years of a Labour government, satisfaction with the NHS was at its highest. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of looking forward to going back to square one. Only 13% of people were happy with social care. But that figure's likely to drop because once again, the Conservatives are going full shipman and not testing people for COVID before putting them back in care homes, echoing March to June 2020 when over 20,000 people died when the Tories knew it was airborne, didn't tell anyone, and killed off loads of old people, which is quite weird because that's actually their target base for voters. 48% think that they should increase taxes to fund the NHS properly. Now, the Tories are saying they're putting loads of money into the NHS, but where's that money going? Is it going into the NHS or is it going on GAC at the Garrick? See, people don't mind paying more taxes if it means that it actually translates into public services that work, you know, like going to the hospital and not dying on the floor. Or, you know, people's kids not getting caught under piles of rubble while singing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands during assembly because the school roofs are caving in. Another story that's not getting enough attention is David Neal, who was the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, who is claiming that his report was covered up by the Home Office or amended to try and make the Home Office look better. He ended up having to leak it to the press because they weren't publishing it. And you've got to think about how bad that report is, and it is, in terms of our national security, when over 200 asylum-seeking children have gone missing from hotels that the government only used because they didn't want to process the claims because it turns out most of those people do have the right to remain in Britain. And Britain's always historically benefited from immigration, so I wonder what the issue is with all those brown people that the Tories are trying to keep out of the country. Yeah, I think the answer's in the question, isn't it? Oh, and they're also trying to pay people $3,000 to go to Rwanda when they've already spent hundreds of millions of pounds of our taxpayers' money on something that is essentially just a bit of rhetoric. So yeah, check you're on the register to vote because they're kicking people off it. Get your free voter ID and then vote tactically to get this clown college as far from power as is feasibly possible. Or in jail, or punted off a pier. I'm easy at this point.